Okay, I call this meeting of the Land Use Committee to order. Again, it's Tuesday, March 21st, 2017, and welcome. We're packing everybody into the Carnegie Town Hall today. The first item of business is approval of minutes from the February 21st Land Use Committee meeting. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Any discussion at all? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, under the reports and updates, we have one today, and it's Development Summary Annual Report by Jeff Schmidt, Chief Planning and Zoning Officer or official. Jeff, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Welcome.
And under reports and updates, that's what this is. So we do a development summary annually, and it's this view of what we've completed over the last year. Just to clarify and kind of confirm, one of our missions for our department is that we try to manage development orderly. We look to oversee protection of property and public safety, and earlier you heard a presentation by Matt Tobias that kind of went over some of those things. But in regards to development, everything really starts with annexation. This is petitioned annexations, and we did 10 annexation requests over 1,100 acres last year. The subdivision plats is one of the next stages once the land is annexed in the City of Sioux Falls. They plat the land because that's the transfer from one property owner to the other. We had 1,300 acres of land platted last year. You can look at it like we do, one of two ways: what types of land uses were platted on the left, or where was it platted? And it's really kind of nice to see from both standpoints. Most of it's residential. At the same time, the dispersion across the four quadrants is pretty equal in all four quadrants. Once it's platted, then they're able to start developing it from a really grassroots standpoint where the neighbors start to get interested. And last year we had 77 rezonings, just again with about 1,100 acres of development and only 33 conditional uses. This is what you've seen more often than not from our department: is it's been annexed, it's platted, it's been rezoned, and now they start doing building, and then they're doing construction. How much construction, how many permits are being done. And last year, in 2016, it was a big year, a lot of construction, and over the 10-year time period, as well as how many permits were pulled and for residential permits. What I like to do here is, when I do my presentations, is a lot of that information doesn't really mean anything unless you look at it comparatively. So I track this annually in these presentations and show you, or any citizens of Sioux Falls, what it looks like for other regional areas in the Midwest. So on the very top there, for anybody who's watching this at home, the City of Sioux Falls did 2,751 housing permits, and in Omaha they did 2,550. In Rapid City they did 574. So that's why when we say we did 2,700, that's what it relates to. Otherwise, 2,750 doesn't really mean anything to people. We did last year $700 million of construction. Omaha did $877 million of construction, and Rapid City did $300 million. So now you start to see what it really means comparatively. When we've talked about, and you just got done talking about, 5,000 people moving to Sioux Falls, and what that means, it really reflects back to how many workers are in Sioux Falls. And this is the metropolitan statistical area. We get this from the South Dakota Labor, and the change month to month over the year is that third or fourth column over. And every month, basically last year, there was a 5,000 person increase in jobs. So then the 5,000 person increase in the City of Sioux Falls doesn't look so large when you see how many jobs are being created in Sioux Falls. So there's, again, the comparison and looking at development. And that's the development summary for the City of Sioux Falls. growth leads to jobs, jobs leads to growth. And I can answer any questions. You got a copy of the full report, and it goes online at siouxfalls.org for every citizen of Sioux Falls to look at.
Jeff, thank you. Short and sweet. Questions for
Yes.
Jeff? Councilor Neitzer.
And we do have this full report, and I promise I will read it because it does look interesting.
Sure you will.
Yeah. So the first question was, when you showed the list of single-family housing and then the housing permits in total with the other areas like Omaha,
Yes.
if you go back.
Yes.
So Sioux Falls had 2,751. When you say housing permits, what does that all encompass?
Yes, good clarification. The single family permits are in the first column, and total housing permits are twin homes, townhomes, duplexes, manufactured home placements, and apartment complexes.
Does it, no matter how many units there are in each one, does
Correct.
each one count as one?
Correct.
So it's an apartment count as one?
Apartment is a building, but how many units are in that apartment complex? So they'll build a 24-unit apartment, so we count 24 of them.
In the housing permits?
Correct.
Okay, so Sioux Falls isn't the only one, but it does have a low number, I guess, of single-family permits compared to maybe housing permits by ratio.
Correct.
Is that, is there anything you could say about that? Any long-term trends of, is single-family starting to be outpaced by multifamily, and is that something that's going to continue? I mean, trends.
Yeah, right. And again, it's one of the things that I speak to when I go out and do speaking engagements to groups and organizations, because I try to highlight that and then get feedback from the audience to see what they're interested in. So I'm going to do the same thing here and find out where you think it's going. But the long-term trend is that I think that 600 to 700 is pretty typical. Okay, I don't think it's going to change a lot. Now, why I say that is because the banking industry's changed, and when you want a single-family house, you can't speculate anymore. When you're ready to buy and move into a single-family house, you can't have one sitting out there waiting for you. All right? Before, when we were building 1,000 housing units, those 400, those 300 to 400 extras were already built and just waiting to be moved into. Now, if I want a single-family house, I have to have bought the house, bought the lot, and be ready to be moved into based in the banking industry. I can't have a builder already have built one and just sitting there speculatively waiting for me. So what happens in Sioux Falls is as well as any other market, people that are moving to Sioux Falls have to find a home that they want to move into that's vacant and ready, or they're moving into those other housing permits, which are rentals, apartment complexes, and they go, I need a lot of apartments in Sioux Falls. Plus, the affordability has really changed since the banking industry has changed. So you come in, you're like, I can't even afford to get the down payments or the first time into that single family. This is, again, where I've heard it from the market. So they're moving into those twin homes, townhomes, getting their rates down lower, their mortgages, or moving into apartments and then waiting to move into that single family home.
That's good. And I did sit down with a couple of home builders last week, and they said, and I asked them the question of, what is driving people to want, twin homes versus a single family? I said, well, part of it is maybe, just empty nesters or not wanting to do maintenance, but they think more of it in their experience has been simply people look at the payment.
Correct.
And it's simply a matter of, I can't quite get into the single family, but I can get you a brand new twin home unit, and I can hit your payment number.
Correct.
And so they kind of just make that value trade-off. How is it looking on, I know how it is on the west side because they're talking to me about this, they're clamoring for more sewer because they can't build fast enough, and they're knocking on the doorstep of being at the edge of the, there's no more sewerability almost left on the west side until we get Basin 15. How is it looking on the south side? Is there a lot of buildable area that's sewerable left, or are they almost out too?
They're almost out. That's one of the reasons why we do a development summary to look at the numbers, but it's not listed in here, and we don't talk about it by sanitary sewer basin. That's really more the comprehensive plan and the growth analysis that we do by tiers and the capital improvement program. But to answer more specifically in the question, We originally opened sanitary sewer on the west side of Sioux Falls, and we opened one in the south side of Sioux Falls. And the taxpayers, including city council, they invested millions of dollars to open those basins, and then they've been filled up and invested in. And right now we've opened up, since 2007, the east side sewer, and the west side and south side have been used. So now we have this $40 million investment on the east side that we're waiting to capture. Once that's done, then we can move into one that we've already had. It's not like we've never had the west side, which you and I both live on. So it's west side's already had their chance. South's already had theirs. Now it's the east side, and then it will rotate again to another basin.
So you'd like to see more cost recoveries on the east side of what the infrastructure we've put in?
Where we've already invested our money. Yeah.
Sure, before you
Same
start
thing.
building new sewers.
And again, for everybody's benefit, and I always think that there's citizens at home too. It's like your kids. The kids go, but Dad, can I get a new pair of shoes? We're like, we just invested in these shoes. Once these shoes wear out, how about I get you a new pair of shoes? Well, they all want 4 pairs of shoes, but you go, wait, as soon as these are done, then I'll get you a new pair. Doesn't mean I'm being rude to them. It's like, first use these, and then I can get you another pair.
Sure. Makes total sense. That being said, you know that there's west siders and east siders, and some of them have their affinity.
Correct.
That they
Yep.
want to keep going west. I mean,
And
that's
I
what's
understand
working.
that, but there's only so many that you can pay for.
Absolutely. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Councilor Staley.
Well, first of all, Jeff, do we have the same slides that you just showed on there? I'm not seeing those cities in here. Did you?
No, not that one slide. I added that one slide.
Okay.
That's-
Yeah, I was, okay.
Yep.
So some questions.
Just to clarify, I put them in charts 7 and 8. So in charts 7 and 8 is the scenario of the comparable cities.
Right, I didn't, okay.
You got a table here, and I put it in the chart here.
So we're going to be talking about this annexation thing. And Councilor Neisert and I were able to meet with some of these people on the west side, and we've talked with different citizens who are facing, $30,000, $40,000, $70,000 assessments for this. How does that work when you have these big areas being annexed, as you said? Does the developer pay that fee? I mean, how do you determine, what kind of cost do they pay when they're annexed in?
All of it. So on this exact.
30% or 30,000 per lot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it. So, for example, on these 10 annexations up here, over 1,200 acres, those developers would have to pay for their full cost, the entire thing. So if one of the annexations was 300 acres, they would have to pay for the entire cost of those 300 acres. It wouldn't be $30,000, it would be $5 million.
But it's platted into a homeowner's yard, right?
Right.
So,
That's why, then they would take their 300 acres and they paid $5 million for it, and then they'd subdivide it, and they'd have some commercial land and some apartments and some offices and then some twin homes, and then they'd subdivide it, and we don't get involved in that.
so you can't say, well, the minimum they would be passing on to the homeowner would be 30,000 versus 70,000. And I'm assuming these developers, they don't take the long-term loans that we're offering these homeowners at 4.9%?
Oh, they pay them right up front. They have to pay them to the bank immediate,
Lines of credit.
yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of a gray area that we can never quite.
No, they know.
No, I know, I'm saying what we could say, because that's come up with residential areas like where I live. We are saying, well, we've got the sewer and water put in back in the 50s, 40s when that was put in.
More apples to apples. When I receive phone calls, and again, I'm not on your study, so I'm kind of getting off subject here, but more apples to apples is if somebody in the city of Sioux Falls wanted to go out and buy a lot in the city of Sioux Falls right now, what would they pay for that said lot on the east side, south side, or west side to put in a house? And then that's the apples to apples comparison. If they're buying a lot in a Prairie Meadows versus Copper Creek or Bitterroot or
Old Orchard.
or Old Orchard. So go and price those lots, and those lots like down south are $100,000 or $120,000, and you get about a third of an acre. And in Prairie Meadows, you get 2 acres for and you're going to be paying $30,000.
Okay, and then okay, another question, you were referencing building permits, and I know Tracy Turbeck's always talking about this, and I have asked, what was the amount of building permits for last year?
$701 million.
And the question I've asked, and it has yet to be answered, is how does that play out into revenue for the city?
Right.
You know, because it looks like a big number, but filling our coffers with, you know, when do we ever see that figure, or is that kind of an ongoing slushy? It kind of goes in and
it's an economic analysis, and I'm not an economist. So, I mean, you have jobs being created. They're buying things. They're buying construction materials. They're paying for pickup trucks. And so, if they're doing construction in Sioux Falls, there's return, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Well, I thought at some point you'd be able to say, well, this assessment is going to be X amount for the property taxes.
Right.
So that would be kind of a given that you would know that this is.
But the property taxes don't necessarily come to the city of Sioux Falls. The property taxes go to the county and the school district. We get sales tax.
But we get some property taxes too in the operational fund. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Councilor Knights.
I will just throw in, it's getting a little off topic, and we could talk about it offline, but sitting down with those home builders, and they also do development, yeah, like as you said, they annex a large chunk into town, and then they plat it out, and they split it all up. They've got to pay for 100% of that when they develop that subdivision, so they have millions and millions of dollars in there, and so every lot, you go buy a vacant lot or you buy a new home, it's built in there, and they did give me some numbers, and so, you know, they're not doing that for free. All of those costs are passed on to the end users. So if you buy an $80,000 lot in the city of Sioux Falls, it has a certain amount of money that's built into that paid for the sidewalk and for the sewer and for the road in front of it and for the street lights, because they have to put all of that in there, and that is passed on. So it's an interesting discussion.
And I think that's probably typical. Like $70,000 for a lot in Sioux Falls is probably, I mean, if you're out there shopping, I mean, there's high-end ones that, I mean, are well over the 100,000, but I think, you know, $60,000, $70,000 would probably be an average lot price.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much. That brings us to the open discussion part of our agenda. Any points for open discussion? With your permission, I would like to just, over the past month, I've sent you several communications regarding the annexation task force, and I would just like to read in little snippets of what I have sent to you so that we have a good public record of that. May I have your permission to do so?
Sure.
The task force, well, our first meeting will be April 11th at the main library from 2 o'clock to 3:30. Task force members include Councilor Selberg, Knightsert, and myself, as well as 4 citizens. And our citizens represent an individual from a petitioned annexation, another individual representing the city-initiated annexation, another individual representing the pre-annexation agreement category, and then an individual from, that is a Prairie Meadows property owner. So I think, and then in addition, we'll have city staff that will serve as resource members of the task force, and they'll represent the planning department, the engineering department, the attorney's office, and the finance office as well. And so just very briefly, the purpose of the task force is to establish criteria that will be used in the future to move forward with annexations. It should be a process that not only assists the city in the planning and the coordination of services, but it is important we identify a process that's agreeable and beneficial to all citizens, including the citizens affected by annexation. No doubt we'll face challenges ahead, but rest assured we will take as much time as needed to ensure we produce an effective and fair procedure. And as I've mentioned before, this process is intended to be open and collaborative. I think that's the only way we're going to effectively address this issue. And some of the issues that we will address, thus far, we've identified 5, and it's very possible that the committee will add to that. But number 1, what will be the established criteria used to move forward with the city-initiated annexation and possible considerations? The unannexed property is surrounded by developed land, or the unannexed property will benefit from an upcoming CIP project or a CIP project that was recently completed, or what is the financial impact of the required improvements to the property owner? And then number 2, how will the properties meeting the established criteria be prioritized? Number 3, what will be the required infrastructure improvements if annexed? And number 4, should the city hold up development if an annexation creates an unannexed pocket of land adjacent to the annexed property? And then number 5, should the city commit additional funds to infrastructure improvements to reduce assessments to the property owners? And as I mentioned, we'll very possibly be adding additional issues to address based on input from the committee as well as from others attending. And then we do have a number of agenda topics, and right now it stands at 10, and we're slated to tackle anywhere from 2 to 3 or 4 over the course of the first 4 meetings. And the 5th and final meeting will have to be rescheduled because our first meeting was actually pushed back due to a conflict with the city's, the mayor's State of the City budget or address. So the committee will meet, and then we'll determine when that last meeting will be held, or possibly, I'm thinking very possibly, we're going to be going beyond 5, because as I mentioned, we'll take as much time as we need to effectively address this issue. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're trying to do. And Councilor Staley, you've got a comment to make?
Well, I would just add a number 6 to that at some point, I would like to see an ordinance brought forth that would help to open that up so we can offer this extended payment to the citizens without that loan, that interest rate. And I guess it's in ordinance. So I don't know where that would, if that would be part of what the task force would talk about, or is that something?
I think so, and I think that would very possibly actually could fit as a subcategory of one of the issues that we address, but very possible, yes.
Okay.
And we're going to be open-minded to absolutely everything going into this. Councilor Selberg.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have any shortage of topics. I'll be shocked if we get all this into 5 meetings. But I think there's been a nice job done getting a diverse group on this committee. We got people coming into it from all angles of this subject. So I think we'll have really good discussion, a good mix of people. I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to, hopefully we'll make good progress, but we'll have good discussion. I think, like I say, bringing everybody in from different areas there is going to help.
Thank you, Councilor Selberg. Any other items for open discussion? Okay, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.